Special treat. We have Damion here from Central Office. Damion's title is the something of the something, but he really has a lot to offer. And so I charge everybody here to stay, to really zone in into his workshop and really pick his brain because he has a lot to offer as far as instruction and curriculum at the school. So with that, I will give Damion the floor.
Awesome, thank you. Good afternoon. Hopefully everybody's well. On your desks, you have a picture with some words associated with it. If everybody could grab one of those. If you didn't get one, please let us know. So, not me. Please let me know so that I can get you more. It should be the extra file. Everybody got it? Great. Can I have a volunteer, please, to entice us with your reading voice? Thank you.
Too often we are scared. Scared of what we might not be able to do. Scared of what people might think if we try. We let our fears stand in the way of our hopes. We say no when we want to say yes. We sit quietly when we want to scream. And we shout with the others when we should keep our mouths shut. Why? After all, we do only go around once. There's really no time to be afraid. So stop. Try something you've never tried. Risk it. Enter a triathlon. Write a letter to the editor. Demand a raise. Call winners at the toughest court. Throw away your television. Bicycle across the United States. Try bobsledding. Try anything. Speak out against the designated hitter. Travel to a country where you don't speak the language. Patent something. Call her. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain.
You don't have to say that. Yeah. We don't need to just do it. So, what does this have to do with questioning in the classroom? And we're going to get to that sort of metaphysical level of up here. Well, how does this idea of trying something new actually apply to the way we question and give tasks in the classroom? That's the overarching vision for this. Now, I just want to give a little background for this, actually. This was on the back cover of Sports Illustrated in 1986. I've saved it all this time. I cut it out in 1986 and put it up on my wall, and it stayed there through college and everything. It was all crumbly, crinkly, and eventually, when I got married, I threw it away because my wife was like, "That's not going in my bedroom." So I threw it away, but I took a picture of it before it got too messed up. But this has always stuck with me, and it's stuck with me because it's always been about taking the risk when you think it's a really hard thing to do, or in a traditional setting that we're mostly placed in, the idea of school and systems of school, that we should do it a certain way. And I'm here to tell you, especially speaking from having a lot of fun walking around with great instruction, and that you don't have to do it that way. And there's some really great ways to switch it. And it all starts with how you ask questions and how you give tasks. Stop there. Before we get too much further, I'm also on the committee for PARC for the district, and we're thinking big about what needs to happen. And at the end, over the course of this time, if you're thinking about, well, what is this going to look like? What does it feel like for me? How are we going to prepare the students? Is it just going to be typing? What are we doing centrally to support you? I'm going to give you a couple minutes at the end to ask those questions because I can answer a bunch of those, especially as of today. All right? Great. Okay. Inside your folders on the right side is a teacher work packet, and it says actually teacher work packet. And I think the cartoon on the front is pretty indicative of where we're going, is that same old questions need new answers. I would like to argue that we need new questions to get us to the same answer, not necessarily the other way around. If you open up to the first page on the left, in the back, you have a bit of a do now. And using the story of the three little pigs, write 3 questions that would elicit a distinct understanding of the story But you are not allowed to use who, what, when, where, why, or how. Those words are banned. 3 questions that if you ask the kids after each these questions, you know that they understand the story. But you can't use who, what, when, where, why, and how in your questions. I will allow leeway to the degree of they can't all be. No. Sticks. You can't use the words how, who, what, when, where, why, or how at all in your question. I don't know. I give you the that's later. Thanks.
I gotta finish my.
No, I know you're going, so it's just awesome. Yes. Or is that what the figure's saying? All right. Yes, ma'am. questions that they came up with. If you hear something that you really like, I would suggest that you copy down the context. You don't need to copy down the whole question, but just the context of how they asked the question. Would you like to, did I give you enough of the treat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you feel the first little pig thought he was safe in his house of straw? Do you feel the first little pig was safe?
So I'll repeat, do you feel that the first little pig was safe in his house of straw? That's a very key plot point, right? Thinking about effort and all those types of things. Can you share?
Rewrite the ending of the three little pigs so that the wolf and the pigs become friends.
Awesome.
Contrast the three little pigs in so many ways that they were different from each other.
Awesome. 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 Can you share what you had? And then
Create illustrations from the outcome of the story.
please.
Make a connection between the moral of the story and the moral of another text.
We haven't lost the text itself, text the text, and text the world life. That hasn't gone anywhere. Please don't think this because we're in the expeditionary learning world that has vanished. These are still the way our brains work. It's okay to use this. Go ahead.
Okay, after reading the three little pigs, describe the role of the pig and describe the role of the pig and the wolf in the story. You got it.
Very EL sounding question. Please.
The unification of the three pigs ultimately changed the outcome of the story.
Whoa. Pig power. Yes, go ahead.
Using your own words, explain the wolf's actions in the story and the characters.
Excellent. So, what was hard about this process? Somebody give us your feeling about coming up with these questions. Okay, so tell me about what for you, what was hard?
Not using those traditional who, what, where,
Those are the W, yeah, 5 W's and an H, right? What else was difficult for you about this? Yeah.
Actually making them into questions with false statements, because they're not, unless you add can you, most of them are just flat statements.
So thinking about like turning
Trying to
this
actually
into
make it a question.
right, how to actually make this a question that's something that's driving. What else? Happy you were so. What did you find easy then? Oh, go ahead, please.
Making sure that the questions, the kids couldn't respond by saying yes or no.
Excellent, excellent. We're going to look at a couple of part sample questions later and how that's just not possible, right? Okay, what was easy about it for some people? I know some people teach this actual subject, but some people questioning is great, yeah?
I think if you know the basis of the Bloom's taxonomy words, then you can just take one of those and make any of the questions back.
Excellent. We're going to do a lot of work on aspects of that today. Yes?
Also coming out of that emotion, sometimes we know the kid, we attach a question mark to it, but our checking for understanding doesn't have to be the question. So because sometimes if you're saying compare and contrast, we're still asking them to analyze the text that we've gone over, but we're not saying in the stating in the question form action. So once you go past that barrier, we could take the question.
So the action is the most important thing, not necessarily the question of it, right? Excellent. Awesome. Well, we just gave some questions, and I love this one because it goes back to if you ask the right question, you'll get the answer that you're looking for, right? But this is another one. I was in a school the other day, and I love this. This is like one of my favorite things that a kid has ever said. Teacher says to be quiet. He says, okay. So he sits there and he's quiet. 30 seconds later, he starts talking again, right? And you think, and the teacher's like, why are you talking? And he said, you never told me for how long. And it was like, well, yeah. And the teacher gets all mad. It's like, you're right. Or you didn't say for how long. You told me to do an action, right? So the idea of qualifying the actions is what's most important when you talk thinking about action statements that are statements, right, as questions. So compare and contrast what? Right? The three little pigs, that's not enough. What of the three little pigs? How they built their houses, you gotta really dig deep into what are you trying to get out of it. Compare and contrast the three little pigs. Well, one's taller than the other one, one's shorter. I mean, one has like a straw sticking out of his mouth. What are you looking for, right? And that's that clarity aspect of the kinds of questions that we get into. All right, awesome. It's one of my favorite great little quote.
Wow.
So, one of our rules this year, myself and my boss, Mr. Center, is that when we go to a school, we have to find one class that's having fun. That's our goal, right? One class that's having fun. And if we don't, then we email the vice principal, principal, and say, find one class having fun. What's going on? Have fun. And fun not meaning lack of rigor or doing something silly or not really paying attention, but fun as in how are the kids responding to the kinds of work that you're presenting? So the kinds of tests and the kinds of questions that you provide. If a notebook is having more fun at home than a kid in school, we've got problems, right? And we need to fix them. Especially if those kids are in like kindergarten and we're having them sit, not kidding, but we're having them sit in rows and do worksheets and all this type of stuff and worksheet, worksheet, worksheet. And in fact, before the school year started, I was walking the dog with my younger son who's now in 3rd grade, and we were talking and I said, oh, you know, excited about school. And he was like, I was like, all right, tell me what's going on. And he said, you know what? I'm tired of worksheets. If they would just let me play for 30 minutes, I'll work for an hour, and then I'll just play again, and then I'll work for an hour, and I'll play again. And I'll work all day. I just can't do all those worksheets. And it's just like, you know, of course, like, thinking theoretically, I'm like, yeah, right? And I'm like, well, where are those math and focus workbooks? And like, we're trying to get those out to school, and at the same time, where's the balance between the two? And so to some degree, I'm sort of happy that we haven't gotten them out because it's forced people to think about ways of getting around that and trying to do the work with the kids. And that's not a bad thing. Believe me, we want to give you the books so you have support. What I'm saying is that there has to be a level of what are you bringing to this? How are you making that problem, which is incredibly boring, estimate 232 plus 473, how are you making that fun? That goes back to that. Okay, so either super purposeful or really ironic. Why do we ask questions in school? Why don't we just tell and have them do? What's the point of questioning? So check my I know what they know after if I just tell them, please, here's a question on the board. A statement on the board, please write it down.
But then it's not getting them to think. All right, we're giving them everything.
Are we not giving them everything? What are we giving? How are they constructing knowledge?
Well, the way that we teach, I mean, the materials that we use to teach, the way we teach is how they learn.
So when you get a book, right, you give a book, give a book to a kid and you say, read this. And then you ask them questions based off of that, right? That's a pretty traditional way of like, we read it together, you read it with her, and then you ask questions based off of that. Why are you asking questions? Why don't you just let them read it? Do you have somebody quiz you after you read a book at home? I mean, there are, like, now they have those questions at the end of the book for discussion, right? So, but literally, do you ask yourself those kinds of questions after you read at home? Now you or if you like, or if you're doing your bills and you look in your account, and you're not, the questions you're asking are like, if I estimate this, you know, you're like, well, I have no money for this, you know, those are the kinds of questions that you're asking, which is still based on numerical values, something real. So, my question is, why are we asking questions in that way when it's so not what we do in our lives? Please.
I was going to say to promote their own learning, right? Because we want them to get to a point where they're asking themselves these questions without having us there standing behind them.
So the point of the question
about
is
the checkbook, then you know, nobody's standing there. If I estimate this and this, I can probably budget for this. But if we're not asking them those questions in class, then they're probably not going to be able to do that individually.
Awesome. Go ahead.
The whole point actually is that it's to thinking. We want them to think about their thinking. And they don't automatically do that. We have to teach them how to do that. So when we start teaching them those different tools and strategies as they read, after a while, it becomes part of what they're doing. And when we do that, we point it out as they do it. Like when we read the passage, what are you doing right now? Which one of those strategies? Well, now I'm questioning. All right, what are you doing right now? I'm visualizing. When you didn't know that word, what happened? Did your screen close? Now you don't want to visualize because you didn't know the word. Now I told you the word, did your screen go back? Yeah, because I can visualize it now because I know the word. Once we teach those strategies, then they will eventually use on their own, but they can't use what they don't know.
Oh. Me?
Yeah.
She said, I was gonna say quick essentially what you're trying to say. You want to building skills and kids when they become, they independently go by themselves.
So we've already characterized two kinds of question purposes, right? One, to see what they know. Two, to develop their ability to question themselves. Those are two really different purposes.
Right.
Really, really different purposes. And we get caught up in the weeds of checking for understanding, and not really caught up in the weeds of how does this develop the child's thought process? How much time do you put into thinking about that kind of question? I mean, whoa, that's like going to take a while. We're going to talk about those kinds of questions later, but that's the dichotomy that we're dealing with in the classroom and in your evaluation, essentially. All right. We actually did all those. So, speaking of, in your teacher work packet, turn to the next page. You have in front of you, I don't talk about anything other than, if some of you may have heard, I don't talk about anything other than highly effective practice. I don't believe that anything else should exist. And so that's what we're striving for, so that's all we're going to talk about. So these are the two highly effective domains for questioning and tasks, as well as responses. We have two things that I think you need to think about. One, if you were to just put this into your own words, what does this mean to you? And what does this mean to you in your class? And then two, what adjective, adverbs do you notice in here? That's everything. We're going to talk about those in a minute. But first, take 3 minutes to just write down what those two, the first one and this one, mean to you in your own words. Oh, sorry. That's it. Give about another minute, please, to finish up on how this, what these two mean to you. tables or with an elbow partner, do question 2. Find out all the adverbs and adjectives and why you think they're important. What are all the adverbs and adjectives? Just in the 2 white boxes, these 2 guys. Why do you think those adverbs and adjectives are important? If I could have your attention back to the front, please, that would be awesome. Would somebody please, in the first statement, identify for me either an adverb or an adjective? Would somebody please identify the adverb or adjective? Just raise your hands.
Consistent.
Consistently. Awesome. Consistently. Could somebody identify in the second frame either an adverb or an adjective that they noticed? Please.
Effectively.
Effectively. Those LY, I think is so nice. Immediate. Awesome. There's one more. Anticipate. Anything else?
All the way
And actually, yeah, all and nearly all. And actually, this is a weird qualifier. That gets into the fun to have the grammar. How do you define this? How do you define that as an instructional leader in a classroom? Consistency. How do you define consistency? Please. Regularly. Yes.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. How else?
Regularly the same way.
So now
the same way.
Now you're qualifying,
Right.
not just saying often, but the quality of that often, right? Yeah. I can come to school the same way, but if I'm later, it doesn't matter. Right? It's the quality of my thing. I'm good. Do you define it in the same way? Consistently? As you just said? As folks just said? Definitely, right? It makes sense. Here's the fascinating part. Between our instructional leaders and our teachers, there's a discord between what that looks like. Now we know what it means. What does it look like? Now remember, they're jumping in, I'm jumping in, whoever's jumping in, they're jumping in for these little tiny snapshots into your class, right? Little tiny snapshots. How are they going to measure consistency? Consistency. How are they going to measure that? When they jump in and like So you've asked these questions, I'm gonna do it again a little while later, they can do it a few times. What do you think you need to do to prove that? That consistently happens both in terms of quality and over time. What do you need to do to prove that and think that you can say, I do this? Go ahead.
I was thinking more so because the content will change constantly.
Yes.
But they're looking for certain norms or routines that will shape your classroom. So even you're able to teach that content, and no matter the content, there are certain keywords that your students are going to know, whether it's a teaching style, learning style, how you want them to sit, how you're going to get the paper, those classroom culture norms or expectations that they will be exceeding if content constantly changes.
Awesome. Good.
I was gonna go with the one thing Mark was gonna say is the student responsiveness, like are they responding to those type of questions? And if you're consistently asking those kinds of questions, and if the rigor is there to reduce those types of questions, then they'll be more susceptible to answering or at least trying to.
Yes, totally.
I was gonna say the feedback. Just like I said, the feedback, how you respond to them, they know the expectation of the standard, they can, give it back to you in certain way, like.
Which is right under this, it's feedback, right? We're not focusing on that today, but yes, you're right. Like how you respond to that provides the space for consistency. Yes.
Being that your administrator only comes in for a little while, they also look at the comfort level with which the children react to it. If you're asking them something that's above them, they'll be able to tell by the kids' reaction, their comfort level with it. If they're looking confused like they've never heard it before, it's going to come through. If the children are used to seeing it, if it's part of their norm, that too will come through.
So, tell me your perspective.
I can go into a classroom and the teacher can say, analyze this, synthesize this, analyze this, synthesize this, within that 40 minutes consistently. But if the students are, what's synthesize mean? Then that's evidence right there that it's not done consistently at that level, as has been said throughout here. So, student response.
The reason I bring this up and bring this to the forefront before we go too much further is because there has to be a correlation between what you do and what you're evaluated on. And that correlation begins with a shared understanding. That shared understanding is something that we work with the VPs and the principals on at our level. And now we're trying to get to your level of saying, well, if you can come up to this level of questioning, of doing this stuff, and know what it means, looks like, and feels like, then the conversation between the two of you is not about how low you're going, but it's about how you're staying up there and how you can expand it. Very different conversation. Okay. Should be a slide every time. This is going directly to what you all were talking about. These are 4 questions that all ask the exact same thing. Oh, you do? Sorry. On the next page in your packet, you discovered, thinking about those 3 questions, this doesn't have to be written, there's a space there, right? What's the difference? Quick funny story about this. I asked my sons to help with this because I was like, what would be like funny or whatever? And so they first said 7 chickens in high heels, and they that's not gonna work. I can't really go out and be like, yeah, it's chicken in high heels to groups of women and teachers. That'd be bad. And then they were like, oh, well then you could say cows in high heels. That's not gonna work either. You have to really, what animal is not going to be, in my head, what animal is not offensive to anybody. And then, so we ended up with the Geico commercial came on and they were like, what if the gecko is in high heels? I I guess we can get away with that one. I hope nobody is offended by geckos and high heels. But pigs and blankets, we make them ourselves, so it's really fun. Not actually pigs, but I don't know. And then the bears and skirts, I have no idea where that came from. That's just having a 8-year-old and 10-year-old. But the idea is distractor information, right? So we're given distractor information for the purpose of developing reading skills in math. What can you discern from this actual problem that's important and what's not? In this particular problem, what are we trying to get at, right? We're trying to get at the fact that the number is no longer finite, or the answer is no longer finite. So we're going from extraordinarily finite, no description, no anything else, to words that encapsulate the actual problem. So there's a two-part process of, in the brain, being able to discern importance and then, actually use it. And then in this part, we're actually building the equation that we're going to have to use to solve, right? So we're doing all of that and this at the same time. And in the last one, we're just confused out of our minds until we can actually figure out what it's saying, and what it's actually saying is 2 + 3 in the end. And it's designed that way to be really silly, but purposeful in the sense that you're not going to see this kind of problem very hard.
Thank you.
It's not going to happen. It's